Okay, welcome to your first video on rhetorical strategies, and I'll have these for each of your readings, and I'll try to keep these pretty brief. The information in your reading really is good information, so what I'm trying to pull out here is just the highlights to assist you in writing your paper, and specifically my expectations as to how you apply these strategies to writing your essays for me. So first, let's just establish what the word rhetoric means. It's not a word that we use very often, and especially if you're taking a course called Composition and Rhetoric, you should probably know what that word means. So rhetoric is any form of persuasive communication. So even though we're not really writing argumentative essays throughout the semester, you are learning all these different strategies to make your essays compelling. How do you make your essays appealing to your reader? And these are all different strategies that you're going to learn, and they will carry over into how you write argumentative essays throughout your college career. So just a quick overview, you don't have to write all this down, but we'll be learning 9 rhetorical strategies throughout the course of this, I keep saying semester, this online course. Description, narration, example, definition, process analysis, compare contrast, classification division, cause effect, and argument. So you will be writing an argumentative essay at the very end. For some of your essay assignments, you'll be given a choice, like for essay 2, your first essay that you're submitting for me outside of class. I'm going to give you a choice between writing a narrative essay and a definitive essay. And in fact, I encourage you to, before you continue this video, to actually pause and then go ahead and look at the assignment for Essay 2, because that's going to give you a better idea of exactly what I'm expecting when you write your first essay, and then some of these ideas will fall into place a little more clearly and easily. So let's start with description. Description is the use of sensory details to create a vivid image. It's pretty straightforward. If you're describing something, you're trying to tell me what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, all those different things. So let's just go back to kindergarten for a minute and remind ourselves what the 5 senses are: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Now, sensory details are very concrete, and they're much more powerful than just general words. And I always like to use the example of a Hot Now Krispy Kreme donut. And if you've never had a Hot Now Krispy Kreme donut, I am so sorry. You need to go out and get one immediately, because they're the best thing on the planet. So if I'm trying to describe a Hot Now Krispy Kreme donut, I could say it's good. This donut is delicious. Well, that's fine, but that's not really compelling to tell someone that it's good or even that it's delicious, because those words are kind of abstract. They mean different things to different people. If I'm going to use sensory details, I could say that a Hot Now Krispy Kreme donut is warm and soft and glossy and has a sugary crunch. And when you feel the box in your hands, you can feel the warmth and you can smell the sweetness, that yeasty sweetness that is oh so tempting. And you can touch the glossy coating of the donut. As far as sound, I guess it doesn't really sound like much when you bite into it. But all those other details are much more convincing and appealing. So those are the types of details you want to use when you're using description in an essay. Now, when you use description, you really want to think about the purpose. Why am I describing this? How am I trying to compel my audience? So you are going to use description in a narrative essay. We're going to talk about narration in a minute. So you will be telling a story, and you're going to use these details to make your story come to life. So one of the options I give you in Essay 2 is to tell the story of your worst accident or brush with danger. And I always have people who tell stories of like a car wreck or something like that. So if you're telling the story of a car accident, then you want to include details like the screeching of tires, right? Or the acrid smell of smoke, or the sound of, crunching metal. So all of those details are going to make your story come alive, and they're going to compel your audience to believe that this is an important story that you're telling. Does that make sense? So always recognize the purpose. Figurative language is also a powerful tool. Figurative language is things like comparisons, metaphors, similes. So maybe you would compare, let me give you an example. Another of the topic choices I give you is to tell about your favorite Christmas memory, okay? So maybe one of your favorite Christmas memories is, you got a really special present, like you got your first car, or you got your first bike, or something like that. And so you could talk about how opening the wrapping paper or walking around the corner and seeing that car was like discovering a whole new world. You were like Christopher Columbus in 1492, because now you were in the world of independence, right? A world of new discovery. And so just making comparisons can be really powerful as well. So for a good example of a descriptive essay, in your book, page 660, this essay is called A Day at the Theme Park, and this guy writes this description of what it's like to go to a theme park for the day. I think you'll enjoy it, even if you just read a few paragraphs. He kind of has a sarcastic sense of humor, but his description is really powerful. All right, the second rhetorical strategy that you read about is narration, which is essentially telling a story. Okay, so if you write a narrative essay, you are going to tell me a story. That's all that means. And you will be writing a nonfiction first-person narrative. So in other words, it's going to be a real story from your life, no fictitious stories here, and you will tell it from your own perspective. All right, when I was a child, this happened to me, for example. As you think about your topic, what story you might tell, be sure your story has a purpose. It really should, in order for it to be a compelling essay, it should reflect an important moment in your life. And I try to pick topics that would lend themselves towards that. Typically, when you have a brush with danger or some sort of accident, it causes you to, reconsider the direction of your life or reflect on the importance of family or whatever. Childhood memories are often, those really vivid memories are often like turning points in our lives. So, choose a story that is significant to your identity, significant to your life. And topic choice really, really is important. Mostly, you need to choose a story that you can tell well within the constraints of the assignment. So you only have 400 to 500 words. So you can't tell the story of your 2-week camping trip in Appalachia. Does that make sense? Like, you just can't fit that into 400 to 500 words. So it needs to be a really short story, something that you can use those descriptive details, use the, paint vividly, but just in a few paragraphs. So you will find that you struggle more, especially with the narrative story, in going over the word count than reaching the word count. So just keep that in mind, that not every story is one that will work for this assignment. So you really have to think through it. And of course, you can always email me if you have questions about a topic, do you think this will work, etc. As you tell the story, make sure that you tell it in real time, okay? So follow a chronological time sequence. It's very tempting when you go to tell a story to give all this back information, like to try and, explain the whole context of your family. Well, you just can't do that in a short essay. So you can give a little background in your introduction. You can give us a little context, but your body paragraphs really need to be you telling the story in real time, right? So your first paragraph, that morning was a perfectly sunny, beautiful, normal morning. We got in the car, we headed to school, we were driving along, listening to music on the radio, and then the unthinkable happened. You move to your next paragraph. As the red truck pulled out in front of us, I heard the screeching of tires and my mother's gasp, as she tried to avoid hitting him. And so you are actually telling that story in real time. You don't have flashbacks or anything like that. Stick to a chronological time sequence. And then use description to make your story vivid and compelling. So I'm actually asking you, if you choose narrative for your topic choice, that you use two strategies. That you're telling a narrative, right? You're telling a story, but you're using description as a supporting strategy. Okay, and all this is explained in the instructions for Essay 2. But you'll be using two strategies. Another option is to use the strategies of example and definition. So let's talk through those. Example is this is pretty straightforward. You're using illustrations, you're using examples to support your point, and that's how you choose to develop your essay. The two main things that you want in a good example, or good examples, are details and relevance. All right, your examples should be detailed and relevant. A vague example is boring. It needs to be concrete. You need to use good details. So let me give you an example of an example. One of the topic choices I give you is to define a good friend. All right, definitive essay, define a good friend. And so let's say you're going to define a good friend as someone who is honest. That's one of the qualities. And so use the example of your friend Carly, who is honest sometimes to a fault. In fact, one time you were dating a guy and Carly very honestly told you why he was bad for you. Now, it hurt at the time. However, Carly's honesty actually kept you from a very dangerous situation. So that's a really interesting example, right? Like we got some vivid details there. We got some interesting elements about your personal life. And so that's what makes it good and interesting. It also needs to support your point. That's what relevant means. It actually goes with what you're trying to say. And we've all sat through a sermon or a lecture where someone gives an example and they get to the end of the story and they can't remember how it relates to their point, and that's just no good. So make sure your example doesn't ramble on so long that you lose the point. So your friends aren't standing there going, "Good story," and it really wasn't. So I would say if you're using examples in your definitive essay, you need to use at least one concrete real-life example for each of your main points. So let's talk about definition. For the purposes of this class, a definition is a list of distinguishing characteristics. All right, so what characterizes this idea? And what you will be doing is you will be offering a personal definition of an abstract term. And I believe the three options I give you are define a good friend, define heroism, and I think define courage. I can't remember exactly what I put on the assignment sheet. So you will be saying, this is what heroism is to me. Because, that means different things to different people. Everyone has their own definition of what a good friend or a hero constitutes. So you're going to give me your personal definition. Now, I would limit yourself to discussing 2 to 3 distinguishing characteristics. Again, that word count limit is what is going to kind of force your hand as far as how much you can say. So, for example, you might say, and I used this before when discussing example, a good friend is defined as someone who is caring and honest. So that'll be really straightforward. In this, a definitive essay lends itself towards really easy organization. So then you would have a paragraph about what it means for a friend to be caring and what it means for a friend to be honest. And then you will use that definition as your thesis statement, and you'll use supporting examples from real life, okay, to flesh out your paragraphs, just like I discussed in the slide on examples. So I hope you can see how these strategies, they go hand in hand. Yes, it will be a definitive essay, but the examples are an integral part of your definition. Just as with narration, yes, you are telling a story, but the description is an integral part of the story. That's how you make the story vivid and compelling. So that's a big thing in this class, is seeing how these strategies work together for you to make an excellent, compelling essay. And finally, another sample essay for you in Steps to Writing Well, page 636, has a really good example of a definitive essay that uses examples. And this is about this guy decides to define what it means to be a nerd. And he gives kind of an unusual definition and uses examples from his own life and the lives of his children, and it's a pretty funny read. So you may enjoy looking at that one. All right, so hopefully this equips you to do well on Essay 2, and you do need to know these rhetorical strategies for the purposes of testing as well. So, but if you have questions about anything, just shoot me an email.